One thing was clear to me in trying to run the hotel was that it was an impossible size uh, to of holding guests of approximately uh, 70 rooms and 140 guests if it was filled up. The income from those people was not above, not far above the expenses that we had. Uh, we're trying to be a hotel that has good chefs, that we provide a band and entertainment. We provide a lot of help, tennis pro, dance teams, all kinds of things. But we don't have the size, the number of guests that we need to pay for all of these things. And having them was necessary in order to stay in business. So the next step was to figure out how we could add the number of rooms to what we had to provide for a larger amount of guests that would pay for all the things that we needed to have in order to be a successful resort hotel. I had heard that it was possible to get a small business loan from the government, and I planned to add a new wing to the hotel. This was a large expense. It meant that we would have to add at least 24 rooms to what we had in order to make this a profitable venture. And 24 rooms, I had no idea what that would cost, but I had to look into it. And so I talked to people around, and the two people who were influential in my thinking were Abe Lipkins and Jules Gerson. They were business people. They had some interest because of their investment in adding to the hotel and their desire to make it profitable and keep it successful. They had a stake too, as well as Babe and me, in keeping this hotel running well and making some money. And so I spoke to Abe Lipkins first about it because he and his company had a lot of influence with politicians and people in New York City from the work they did in running the city lighting system. Abe Lipkins looked into the matter and found that he might be helpful in getting a in getting me a Small Business Administration loan from the U.S. government, because the government was interested in helping small business enlarge and be successful. At that time, the economic situation was not too good in the country, and they were interested in making loans to help small businesses like my own. The first thing I had to do was get an architect to draw plans for adding to the hotel that we had, and we figured that it would be possible to add 24 rooms, a new wing of 24 rooms, to the existing building. Anyway, that was the general plan that we gave to an architect, and he drew up plans that included 24 new bedrooms, as well as a men's and ladies' sauna, room for a masseur and a masseuse, and the heating system for the new wing, and a new card room that would be possible to place on the lower floor of this projected new wing. Anyway, after a few months, the architect drew up the plans, and we went over everything, and it looked like a possible plan to go through. And when I asked the architect how much this would all cost, he said he wasn't sure, but it would be over $200,000, and probably under $300,000, depending on what kind of builders we could find in our area and their desire to do the project. Of course, I didn't have that kind of money, and it all depended on our securing a Small Business Administration loan. And I was guided in that effort by my bank, the Mahopac National Bank, and Abe Lipkins and his Broadway Maintenance Corporation that had influence in political influence in New York City. Late in 1963, I started getting bids from builders based on the plan of the architect, and a few of them came in around $300,000. One of the builders that I thought was I might want to use, by the name of Beluzzo, a son and a father who ran a building business and had built some buildings in Shrub Oak neighborhood, about 6 miles away from our site, so that I could. I went to see what their buildings were like, and I was impressed also by the fact that these were hard-working people who weren't sitting in an office and trying to get things done. They were out in the field and doing the work themselves. I was impressed by their attitude and started to talk to them about the likelihood of getting the small business loan from the government, and it seemed like we could get about $200,000, a loan of about $200,000, and that would be almost all of what I had available for the building, because in addition to the building, I also had to furnish this construction with beds and mattresses and all the things that go into making hotel rooms, and I had to enlarge the dining room and buy new chairs. Probably, I think about what we needed was 200 chairs, which I had gotten a price on of about $14 per chair. So adding these things in I had enough money for the additions, but for the construction, my limit would probably be $200,000. And speaking to Meluzzo and getting a quote from him, I kind of told him that my top price was in the neighborhood of $200,000. He came back in a few weeks and with a detailed description of what it would cost to build the place. And he said he would try to keep it as close to 200,000 as he could, but he wasn't going to give me a price, a guaranteed price, and lose money on the construction. So we came to some kind of understanding that he would do everything in his power to do the job for under 200,000, but in case it was a little more, he expected me to owe him the difference. If it was a little less, it would be good for both of us. So after going over these quotes with my advisors, Lipkins and Gerson and Babe, we agreed to go with Meluzzo as the builders. There was one other important consideration. this was getting close to the end of the year in '63, like December of '63. And if we started construction immediately, we had 6 months to get the building done and furnished by July 1st. If we missed that deadline and lost some of the summer months when we would be normally the busiest and taking in the most income, it would be a losing proposition and I would be bankrupt. So it was absolutely essential that this project be finished by July 1st. And 6 months was not a very long time to build a building of this size. Maluza said he was pretty sure he could do it, and we shook hands and said, okay, let's get to it. So Maluza started building right after New Year's, and he had to lay the foundation, and the temperature was a problem because you can't pour cement in freezing weather, but we were lucky that the weather stayed above freezing. He was able to get in the foundations fairly quickly. This was going to be a fireproof building with no wood in the construction. The floors were going to be 4 inches of cement, and the walls between the rooms were going to have insulation that was fireproof and also soundproof. I didn't want to have a room where neighbors in different rooms could hear each other and disturb one another. So the architect had planned that this would be a building that would be soundproof. Anyway, Maluza and his men went to work and were proceeding quite well. As a matter of fact, we also had a friend of mine who was in the glass business. We hired him to put in, enlarge the dining room and put in new windows facing the lake. Those windows were large and absolutely beautiful, and he did those in April while Maluza was doing other work. And I remember that the dining room was pretty much finished in time for Passover, and we had a Seder service and guests using the dining room for that Passover. Anyway, it was very exciting and frightening kind of time, racing against the days and to make sure that we got finished by July 1st, because we had rented the rooms to guests for that time, and we had to make sure that the rooms were habitable. And through Maluzzo's good work and my efforts in getting the material, the beds and furnishings that would go inside the building once it was finished, delivered. Everything worked out, and we did open by July 1st. And it was a very, it was probably the most satisfying thing I had done in my life. That effort and the success, and the rooms came out beautifully, and they were all very desirable to guests who had been coming to the hotel and staying in rooms that were about 12 by 12 and had small closets. These rooms, the bedrooms, were roughly 12 feet wide and 18 feet deep. And that the bathrooms were large and had two sinks, one for each of the two people that would probably inhabit them, and a big walk-in closet. They were superb and very desirable, and they were very easy to sell. As a matter of fact, we always sold out those rooms first, and people would take them for weeks or months during the summertime. So once the building was up and furnished and running, that was in the summer of 1964. We were very successful, and the Small Business Administration loan that I got was partnered by the local Mahopac National Bank, who oversaw. They were the ones who got the money from the government and were the intermediary in giving it to me as the building was going up. The terms were I had 10 years to pay back the loan, and the interest rate was 4%. The reason it was only 4% was that Putnam County at that time had a large number of unemployed people, and that affected the interest that would be charged. The bank was happy to do it because they got a larger amount of the interest payments than the government, so they made out well on the deal. Because the business was successful, I was able to pay back $20,000 a year for 9 years, And at the end of the 9 years, we ran into a situation in which the United States had a gasoline shortage because the oil supplying countries had kind of embargo on the amount of oil they would ship to us. And we had rationing so that people could only buy gasoline on every other day. So depending on your license plate, you could get your gas on Monday but not Tuesday, and even to get it when you were entitled to it was difficult because there were long lines at the gas stations, and you had to wait for hours to get gas. And almost all of our guests came by automobile from the surrounding districts of Westchester, New York City, New Jersey, and had to drive up, and they had to get gas in order to drive up, and many of them couldn't stand the weight of using gas to go for a pleasure trip or a vacation and then have to wait on long lines to replace the gas when they needed it for work. Our business was reduced by almost half in that year. And when time came for me to pay that $20,000 to the bank, I had to go to them and tell them that I would be unable to pay that year, that I would be able to pay the 4% interest I owed, but I had to delay the payment on the amortization of the loan until the gasoline situation straightened out. It was a very difficult period. Not only that mortgage was difficult. That was a second mortgage, but my first mortgage I had difficulty in paying, and I owed that money to my aunt and uncle, Ben Silver and Rebecca Jackson, who had written the first mortgage when I bought the hotel in 1961. I had a meeting with Ben Silver, and he gave me a very hard time on that fact that I couldn't pay the interest on that mortgage, and said that it's almost a sacred duty to pay your mortgage. It was a very distasteful moment when he was so difficult about the fact that I couldn't pay. At any rate, the gasoline situation or the oil situation with OPEC was straightened out or came to a happy ending in probably 6 months, and gasoline was once again free, and our business improved, And with all the changes that we had made in converting the old rooms from semi-private baths to private baths, and having the penthouse occupied and bringing in money to us, and Abe Lipkins paying rent on the boathouse and bringing guests. At any rate, with the new building being occupied, we seem to be in a good financial position, and I seem to have less problems or even thoughts of problems in running the hotel and making a profit.